Welcome back to College Football Addiction. We've got Tom Hannifan on State of State and Believe in Big Ten, and we have made it to the semifinals. Tom, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing good, man. It's kind of bizarre to pinch myself and think about this as just somebody who grew up a Penn State fan, went to the university, a Penn State family, all that sort of stuff. If you'd have told me in the beginning of the season that Penn State was in the Final Four, I'd have assumed we would have won the Big Ten championship and maybe had a first round bye. But there are no conference champions and there are no first round bye teams in the Final Four. So it's pretty bizarre that it's all come down to this, but it's a really cool matchup. It's a really cool Final Four. I think this is the right thing, I think, ultimately to have happened in this college football playoff, and that the teams earned it on the field. And I think that's what we were all after.
Yeah, this matchup is so intriguing, and it will be so different than a lot of what we've seen so far, and maybe somewhat similar to the Notre Dame Georgia game. Two teams that like to play a lot of defense, run the ball well, but it's hard to figure out Georgia just because they struggled to run the ball and had the backup quarterback. But I like the matchup from everybody likes points, right? Like everybody likes high flying offenses, but this is one where it feels like, man, who is going to grind this thing out better than the other team, and that team's probably going to win.
Yeah, I've seen an over-under floating around 47, depending on where you look. I like the under in this. I think it's going to be another grinded-out type of game. Specifically, as somebody who covers Penn State football for a living, the biggest advantage I see for Penn State is going to be interior of the offensive line against the interior of Notre Dame's defensive line. The loss of Riley Mills, I think, was important. Obviously, it didn't kill them against Georgia. Georgia, while having a massive offensive line, does not have the most talented offensive line, and they certainly have struggled most of the season to run the football consistently and at a high level. I think Penn State, the trend that they've had the last three games is encouraging in terms of rushing the football, and it's also very easy to say that Notre Dame is the best defense they'll have faced in quite some time. The last three opponents, Oregon, SMU, and Boise State, not necessarily the defense that Notre Dame fields. So this is going to be a test. But I think if Penn State is going to have success, it's going to be in between the tackles. Penn State's guards, Sal Wormley and Vega Ioane, who's a 365-pound house that's literally in motion. I love him. And then senior plus center Nick Dawkins. I think they can have a lot of success with the interior of that defensive line, that the interior of the defense for Notre Dame, and especially the way Katron Allen and Nick Singleton have been running as of late. I think that's very encouraging for Penn State.
When you look at the matchup of quarterbacks, I'd love to get your thought on this, but my kind of thought from the outside is that, Drew Aller could probably hurt them a little worse with his arms. Riley Leonard could probably hurt the other side a little worse with his legs. I'm not trying to take anything away from Riley's arms, but I don't know if that's necessarily the. I just I don't like him as much as a quarterback as I do Drew Aller right now. Maybe he plays really well this weekend, but how much does that kind of threat of Riley Leonard's legs, which he was, I think he had 80 yards against Georgia, but they were all super effective. Like they were all either big play. Like it wasn't just like a stat stuffing 80 yards. Like he really ran well, and even that last one that he had around the edge was, I know it wasn't the game sealer, but it was pretty close. What is the concern there with his legs?
Timely runs.
Yeah.
He's a very smart football player. So is he going to kill you in the pass? Not necessarily. There aren't too many receivers, tight ends for Notre Dame that are really striking fear into the hearts of a lot of people across the country, but they'll still be able to get theirs and be able to make a few plays here and there. And Riley Leonard just doesn't make a lot of mistakes. So that's always a great trait for a quarterback. Something that Urban Meyer from Fox has talked a lot about this year, especially covering Ohio State and Will Howard, is the games where they can run Will Howard and basically utilize 10 blockers if you're going to load up the box. So it gives you a lot of different advantages if that's the direction you're going to go. Now, if you want to run Riley Leonard that much against Penn State will make sure that it hurts. I think that's an important thing. I also am very curious to see how Tom Allen spies him, because that was something that Georgia seemed to struggle with. I think this plays into the way Penn State's linebacker personnel shakes out, and that Kobe King is your veteran middle inside linebacker. I don't know if he'd be the guy to do it, but I could see Tony Rojas or Dom DeLuca, who has been a star through the college football playoff for Penn State, a former walk-on who's just made a hell of a career at Penn State. He's this kind of hybrid. I wouldn't call him a safety, but he plays a conventional weak side linebacker spot for Penn State. He's quick enough, smart enough, and nimble enough to stay with a guy like Riley Leonard. Is that the route that Penn State goes to potentially spy him for this game? But it is going to require Penn State to do some similar things that they did against Boise State and Ashton Genty. 7, maybe 8 guys in the box, stunting, trying to make things difficult for the front of the offensive line there in terms of protection, especially in pass pro. So I think Riley Leonard is going to have to extend plays in the passing game to make things happen, which he's very good at. So it's going to be a real challenge for Penn State. And the big question mark for Penn State football fans is, will Abdul Carter play? And if he does play, how healthy is he?
Penn State fans, Notre Dame fans, college football fans in general, I'll get right back to chatting with Tom, but I wanted to let you know I'm going to be down in Miami for the game this weekend, and I'm going to try my very best to do some content around the game. So make sure that you're subscribed. I've really enjoyed interacting with you guys over this last month or so as we've covered the college football playoff, and I look forward to continuing that this week. If you're going to be down in Miami, comment below right now and let me know. Do you have not necessarily an inside, so like, do you have a gut on that? Like, do you think he laces it up?
I think he plays. My concern, and this is a trope that you've seen for years in football, is when the star game changer plays, he's not healthy, but he's given it a go, and it's more of a decoy, or if anything, it can be a detriment to your team. I worry it could be the latter. But certainly hoping for the absolute best. Abdul Carter has taken a lot of things this year very personally, in that he was snubbed for the Nagurski Award. Not too many players nowadays really get ticked off about being snubbed for individual awards. He actually has played as if he's been the Big Ten bully. So I am excited to see if Abdul Carter looks like himself in this game. Penn State also defensive end denied Dennis Sutton. He went down at the end of the fourth quarter against Boise State. I expect him to be able to be okay for that game. But again, James Franklin and company keep this all close to the vest. So this is me speculating, not reporting, everybody. And then the backups for Penn State at defensive end. Amin Vanover had a hell of a game against Boise State. Smith Vilbert is a very reliable backup. Max Granville, who is a true freshman who reclassified from class of 25 to 24, had he not done that, he wouldn't be able to play in the Orange Bowl and be a backup and a rotational defensive end. He's already bulked up to about 250 pounds in a short amount of time in State College, Pennsylvania. So I think Penn State is going to have options at defensive end. They're going to need it. They're a little shallow in terms of overall depth at defensive tackle just because of how the season is worn on. So it will be a question for Tom Allen is, what do you do with Riley Leonard in terms of spying him? And if you can't get pressure from your front four by dropping everybody else, how creative do you get in your blitz packages?
Yeah, with Notre Dame liking to run the ball just like Penn State does. Do you expect some pretty heavy boxes with all the question marks on the defensive line? Like obviously Love has been really good this year. Do you think that they try and take that away and say, hey, beat us passing the ball?
I do. I think that's a natural assumption to make there. And then at the same time, Penn State's just got to be careful in terms of getting burned in the play action. And you saw a handful of times against Boise State, they were able to rip off explosives by just scheming their guys open, play action pass, the amount of respect Penn State had for Ashton Genty in that game. Even Oregon, and it's a completely different style of offense, but Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, Penn State showed respect for the running game, could get burned in the passing game because of play action. So that's just something they have to be careful with on the back end. And again, missing Abdul Carter potentially or having him not at 100%, how does that change what you do in defending the run and defending the pass? And it's not necessarily a situation where Abdul Carter is going to be relied upon to drop into coverage or something like that. I think Notre Dame's tackles can be had by Penn State's defensive ends. Again, depends on where Carter is altogether. But there's this great symbiotic relationship that Penn State has with their front four, their front seven, and their secondary. The secondary's created a lot more coverage sacks than people want to really attribute to this group. So I think they should have a good matchup altogether for the secondary. It's just going to be a matter of putting the ball in Riley Leonard's hands. And I really believe, and this might be just a trope about football altogether, but I'm like, TJ, it feels like a game where whichever team has the better time of possession and turnovers, they win the game.
Yeah, that was literally my next question. So it's perfect timing there. both these teams have been incredibly opportunistic, right? You think about back to the SMU game, a couple of pick sixes, scoring on another turnover, forcing turnovers against Boise State. What were there 4 in the game? 5?
Or could have been 5. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Notre Dame against Georgia. My goodness, 17 points in like a minute or so, with Georgia inexplicably kind of going for it there with 30 seconds to go, and then the kick return touchdown. I mean, their offense scored. I mean, their offense, special teams, their offense really accounted for 9 points, but they were incredibly opportunistic outside of that, and I wonder in this game, not that you would see both teams play like super conservatively, but do you get like a more of a concern? Like, we're not going to make the big mistake. We're going to let you make the big mistake, and then we'll capitalize on it. Because you can say that both teams have been opportunistic, but they've both cashed in when the money's been put on the table. So I kind of wonder if that impacts the game plan too.
I agree with you in that Penn State's defense for most of the season has been able to come away with 1 to 2 turnovers per game, and they've been timely. Talking about, Riley Leonard being able to come up with big plays in a timely fashion. Penn State's defense does the same thing. I have a lot of respect for the way that Notre Dame plays the middle 8 of games, and I'm talking about those 4 minutes on either side of the second quarter and the third quarters. It's really important times for them to capitalize and take advantage of that change of possession. Notre Dame's one of the best in the country of doing that, but you have 2 quarterbacks that are just good about not turning the football over. And I think Drew Aller is been more prone to turnovers this year than he was the year before because he's just been more aggressive and he's been willing to put the ball downfield. I think Penn State's going to have their opportunities to do that. It's just not falling asleep into different robber coverages that Notre Dame is going to be able to throw out there. They're one of the best in the country and one of the more frequent teams in the country to utilize that type of coverage. So you just got to make sure you're playing that carefully. I'm very curious to see how Notre Dame plays Tyler Warren. Is it something where Xavier Watts, do they feel like he can handle Tyler Warren one-on-one? Do you double Tyler Warren the way Ohio State did and then do man defense across the board and just dare Penn State's receivers to beat you? Penn State's receivers have struggled so far this year. There's a lot of matchups where you could see turnovers happening. Both teams are pretty responsible when it comes to rushing the football and that they don't cough up a lot of balls in that respect. Yeah, man. It feels like a leather helmet, drag you down, big bag of knuckles type of game where it's field position, time of possession, turnovers, and coaching decisions are going to make a huge difference in this game because it feels like the margin of error is razor thin.
Yeah, Marcus Freeman, I was so impressed with him against Georgia. Obviously, the punt is what everybody remembers, but I just even thought his creativity and the way that they ran the ball late, like they weren't run the ball 3 times up the middle, like they were running reverses and they were having Riley Leonard scrambled out late. And so, and he was asked about it. He was asked about coaching aggressively, and he put it back on his players like most coaches do. Hey, we can only coach aggressively if they play aggressively. But yeah, he had some stones in him in that game, and I kind of just wonder, does he have anything up his sleeve for this one? How does James Franklin maybe anticipate and counter? I agree with you. The coaching in a game like this feels so much bigger because the margin for error is so much more thin.
Yeah, you have to make the right decisions at exactly the right time. Marcus Freeman, we have a smaller sample size on him because he's only been the head coach at Notre Dame for 3 years. So far, so good. And obviously that play against Georgia where he shuttled everybody on and Georgia was scrambling there is fresh in everybody's mind. James Franklin, as someone who has covered the team, watched every single snap, I can tell you that for his 10 years at Penn State, it's not been his strong suit. However, it has looked better this year in terms of he has relied so much on the analytics in terms of field position, when to punt, when to go for it. Some head scratchers for Penn State football fans. But this year, it has been markedly better, and their answers to those questions have been better, and the ways to convert, the times to punt, the times to go for it. And especially, I point towards the Minnesota game where Penn State went for it on a fake punt, a handoff to Luke Reynolds that ultimately allowed Penn State to continue the drive that ultimately sealed the win on the road against Minnesota. Had Penn State not won that game, they wouldn't be in the college football playoff. So that was a gutsy decision by the coaching staff, which James Franklin even admitted before the game, or after the game, excuse me. He'd called that play probably 6 or 7 times earlier on in the season, but they had checked out of it because they didn't have the formation that was appropriate. So is it trigger happy? Is it aggressive? Is it conservative? We're going to find out in Miami. That's the fun part.
Yeah, I really can't wait for it. I mean, obviously, the game didn't go the way we thought, but we kind of thought, the style of game that we were going to get from Oregon, Ohio State was going to be just high flying points, just
I
insane, which
know.
it was for one side. This feels like the complete opposite, but I still could not be more excited for it. This one feels like a ton of fun, and like you said, for Penn State, you're 60 minutes from kind of where you wanted to get to, and not just there, right? This is a 1.5 point spread, so. I guess if you take them on the spread, you're taking them to win. But what are your thoughts on who comes out on top here?
Man, it really does feel 50-50. It feels like a coin flip. Like my bias is towards Penn State, so naturally I think people are going to claim that that's the reason for the decision. But I like Penn State's ability to score more than I do Notre Dame's. I think Penn State has better weapons in that respect. The big question again is going to be Abdul Carter and that defense. Can they get pressure on Riley Leonard if they do put the passing game on him? Can Notre Dame run the football effectively the way that they've done for most of the season, the way that they did against Georgia? And basically who screws up the most, that sort of thing. It's going to be which team makes mistakes. I don't know if it's going to be a situation where last team with the football wins, but it's going to be a grinded out style of game. I feel like Penn State can win this thing, but it's going to be razor thin. Like if we talked on Friday morning and Notre Dame had won it somehow or won it by a significant margin, I wouldn't be shocked in either direction. I think both teams are capable of beating the other team. It's truly even in my respect.
Yeah, I like the final score to be 21-20, and I'll tell you on Friday who I've got winning it. So
Safe. Safe. Yeah.
honestly, I have no idea. I go back and I do really go back and forth on this. I just like you said, Abdul Carter being out is, if he's not there, that's a big deal. Like there's just. And like you said, how can you predict which team is going to make the big mistake? How can you predict which team is going to have the crucial turnover? If both these teams play a clean game 10 times, I truly do think it's like 5-5 or 6-4. Like it would shock me if somebody won 7 of them, right? It truly could go either way. So
The one thing I'm looking for is, especially for Penn State's offense, Andy Kotelnicki got a little gimmicky in the second and third quarter against Boise State, kind of played with their food a bit. So I'm curious to see if he gets a little bit more vanilla, a little bit more conservative, and then is just pulling out the gadgets at a lower clip, I guess I would say. And then my other thing is Penn State, before Andy Kotelnicki got there, loved that T formation. And as the point that I was saying, if there's a soft spot in the interior of Notre Dame's defense and defensive line, boy, you've got some beef that you can put back there in offensive linemen that have played fullback. You have tight ends galore. You have Katron Allen running the ball down people's throats. Does he just go old leather helmet football in this and then really screw with Notre Dame's head? So there's a lot of possibilities. It'll be fun.
I wonder with that, like playing with their food. I wonder, this is super, rose colored glasses here, but I wonder how much of that is trying to put, in a game that you're a big favorite and you're already out to a big lead, and you're not, I don't want to say not as challenged, but not facing off with a Notre Dame or a Georgia or an Ohio State. How much of that is just trying things for the next game, and how much of it is trying to put things on tape that Notre Dame has to study? I don't know. Maybe that's super rose-colored glasses and saying but I do think that plays a part.
I think that does play a part, and I don't believe that James Franklin and Andy Kotelnicki coach looking to make a statement of any kind. Like they really don't do that. They're very much about how do we win this game, but they also are thinking ahead of what can I put on tape that somebody's going to bite on later. I think that's just gamesmanship. That's incredibly smart coaching. There aren't a whole lot of people that do that. And they've talked about it in post-game pressers ever since the Boise State game, is they saw some things that they thought they could take advantage of. So credit to Boise State in that they were actually able to defend those things and turn Penn State away and kind of make it a game there at the end. So I think a lot of respect has to be given to Boise State and what they did defensively in that game, because you're able to take away some of the gadgets that Penn State wanted to pull out. But I think there's going to be some things that Boise State saw that might crop up again here against Notre Dame, but to what frequency, we'll find out.
Yeah. Tom, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work, bud?
Yeah, check out A State of State, a Penn State football show with myself and former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, wherever you get your podcasts. And also I'm on Believe in Big Ten podcast with myself and Rhett Lewis, who is a former Indiana wide receiver, and he is a host for the Big Ten Network and NFL Network. That's also wherever you get your podcasts, and you can check me out on Instagram and X, Twitter, at Tom Hannifan, TomHannifan.
Awesome, man. Good luck on Thursday, and we will talk to you soon, man.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys again for watching. Thank you to Tom Hannifan, State of State, and Believe in Big Ten for his time today in chatting about the Penn State Notre Dame Orange Bowl winner headed to the national championship. Again, if you haven't already, we are on our climb to trying to get to 20,000 subs before our 1-year anniversary, which is January 18th. We're less than 2 weeks away, but I think we can get there. Help us do it by hitting that subscribe button. Good luck on Thursday. I'll be down there in Miami and can't wait for it. And we appreciate you, as always, for tuning in to College Football Addiction.